Anniversary night. The rain hadn't started yet, but the air already smelled like it. They were driving home from his favorite restaurant. Her heels were off. Her feet were up on the dashboard of their old Volkswagen. One strap of her black dress had slipped down her shoulder, and she still hadn't fixed it. 10 years of marriage, 10 years. And Daniel Mercer didn't even turn his head before he ended it. His hands stayed on the wheel. His eyes stayed on the road. His voice stayed calm, too calm. "I'm in love with Vanessa," he said. And then, after the smallest breath, "Tonight is the last night. I'm leaving." No apology, no stammer, no shame, just a sentence laid between them like a knife. If you enjoyed dark betrayal stories, quiet revenge, and slow burn endings, subscribe to Quiet Knife. And if this story hooks you, stay with me until the end. The red light ahead turned green. He drove through it slowly. She didn't answer at first. She lowered her feet from the dashboard, reached for her heels, and slipped them back on one at a time. Click, click. Then she lit a cigarette. The first drag trembled in her fingers, but only once. Vanessa was his secretary, 28, soft voice, sharp smile, the one he always called just a naive girl whenever Eleanor asked why Vanessa texted him after midnight. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat, pulled out an envelope and dropped it into her lap. Divorce papers already signed. "Get out," he said quietly. "Let's not make this uglier than it needs to be." That almost made her laugh. Ugly? He had spent 2 years sleeping with another woman and wanted beauty in the exit. Still, she said nothing. She opened the door and stepped out into the night. A second later, the rain began, not gently, not romantically. It came down hard, cold and sudden, putting out her cigarette almost instantly. She stood there on the side of the road, on the night of her own anniversary, and watched the taillights disappear into the wet black distance. He probably expected tears. Maybe for her to pound on the glass, maybe for her to scream his name, maybe for her to beg him not to throw away 10 years. Instead, she just looked at him through the rain-streaked window and then smiled. A small smile, quiet, private, terrifying. Just enough to make him frown, just enough to put the first crack in his certainty. He couldn't understand why a woman who had just lost everything, was smiling. What he didn't know, what he had never known, was that Eleanor Mercer had not lost everything that night. She had just gained the right to stop pretending. Daniel thought that was the night she found out about Vanessa. It wasn't. She had known for 6 years. It started with a hotel receipt in the pocket of his winter coat. Double room, late checkout, champagne service. At first she had done exactly what broken women do in private. She cried in the laundry room with one hand over her mouth. She sat on the kitchen floor after midnight and reread the receipt until the words blurred. She even wrote a message confronting him and deleted it. Because somewhere between rage and humiliation another feeling entered the room. Clarity. Daniel lied easily, too easily, and men who lie that easily rarely lie in only one place. So instead of confronting him, Eleanor bought a small black safe and bolted it to the concrete floor in the basement behind the old paint cans and holiday boxes. Then she started collecting. Bank statements, credit card reports, wire confirmations, corporate reimbursement summaries, tax records, loan disclosures, travel invoices, expense reports. At first it was just protection, then it became pattern, then it became strategy. For 6 years she lived like the quietest shadow in her husband's life. She hosted dinner parties, remembered birthdays, smiled at clients, sat through charity galas in gowns he paid for with stolen money, while learning in total silence exactly how much of their life was built on fraud. Daniel thought he was clever. He told her he was moving money into high-risk corporate vehicles. He laughed when she once asked about an offshore transfer and said, "You'd hate how boring this stuff is." He assumed a housewife couldn't read a balance sheet, couldn't follow debt restructuring, couldn't tell the difference between aggressive accounting and embezzlement. He forgot Eleanor had studied finance before she married him. He forgot she used to help her father reconcile ledgers in his construction office every summer from age 16. He forgot that marriage had not made her stupid. It had only made her quiet. Every dollar he siphoned from company funds, she tracked. Every gift to Vanessa disguised as client hospitality. Every hotel weekend buried inside executive travel. Every transfer from their joint account into side channels he assumed she never saw. She saw all of it, and slowly, carefully, she started building something of her own. The shell company came first, Blackwood Holdings, a dull name, an invisible name, the kind of name that passed through legal paperwork without making anyone curious. She used a mix of old inheritance money, recovered transfers, and distressed debt purchases routed through intermediaries recommended by an attorney who owed her father a favor. Not enough to draw attention, never enough to move too fast. Just enough to wait where weak companies eventually break. Daniel's company had been bleeding quietly for years. Bad acquisitions, over-leveraged expansion, a pension obligation hidden under polished investor language. The kind of corporate sickness that still wore a good suit. While Daniel was on private weekends with Vanessa, Eleanor was buying pieces of the company's debt. While he was rehearsing his new life, she was learning which banks were anxious, which board members were nervous, and which creditors would sell cheap if someone appeared with cash and patience. By the time he left her in the rain, she wasn't just his wife anymore. She was already inside the walls of the building he worked in. He just didn't know it yet. 3 months passed. The divorce moved fast, almost suspiciously fast. Eleanor asked for no alimony, no dramatic division of art, no public accusations, no scene. His legal team loved that. They called her reasonable. Daniel called her defeated. Vanessa called her forgettable. That was fine. Let stupid people stay comfortable. Then came the company's annual gala, the night Daniel expected to be named senior partner. The ballroom glittered with crystal and money. Champagne towers, black ties, the low hum of expensive ambition. Daniel stood near the center of the room in a tailored tuxedo, one hand at Vanessa's waist, smiling like a man already rehearsing the speech he thought he'd be giving. Upstairs, behind smoked glass in the VIP room, Eleanor watched him in silence. She wore a simple black evening gown, no diamonds, no drama, hair pinned back, face unreadable. On the table beside her sat a sealed leather folder. Inside it, 6 years of theft. That morning, her legal team and a forensic accounting firm had placed the full record before the board. Unauthorized transfers, falsified reimbursements, personal expenditures disguised as business necessity, and enough evidence of embezzlement to destroy not only Daniel's promotion, but his career. At 9:12 p.m., the chairman stepped up to the microphone. The room softened into silence. He cleared his throat and announced that the company had narrowly avoided collapse the month before. A controlling share of its distressed debt had been acquired by a private investor. The restructuring was complete and effective immediately. That investor now controlled 60% of voting shares. Daniel smiled. Poor Daniel. He thought history was about to reward him. The chairman continued. Please welcome the new majority owner of Mercer Hale Capital and the new chair of the board, Eleanor Mercer. For one perfect second, no one moved. Then she stood, walked to the staircase, placed one hand on the railing, and descended into the room he once believed belonged to him. She never forgot his face. Confusion first, then disbelief. Then the blood draining from his skin so fast he looked powdered. Vanessa's champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered across the marble floor. No one bent to clean it up. Eleanor reached the microphone. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't look angry. She didn't need to. Good evening, she said. A pause. Big changes are coming. Another pause. And the first will be the removal of any executive who used company funds for personal gain. That was all. No screaming, no theatrics, no messy public humiliation. Real revenge doesn't need noise. It just needs timing. By midnight, Daniel's promotion was gone. By morning, his access cards had been deactivated. 2 weeks later, the company filed a civil action. Then came the fraud inquiry. Then the frozen accounts. Then the calls from people who had once laughed too loudly at his jokes and now couldn't remember his number. And Vanessa? Women who love shining men rarely stay for the dark. She was gone before the end of the month. The last time Eleanor saw Daniel was outside the courthouse, in the rain, no umbrella, cheap suit, shoulders folded inward like the weather had finally learned his name. He stepped toward her car as she stopped at the curb. His eyes were red, not noble red, not tragic red, small red. How could you do this to me? He asked. 6 years, and you never said a word. Eleanor lowered the window halfway. Rain touched the leather door panel. Neither of them mentioned it. She looked at him for a long time. At the man she had once loved. At the man who had mistaken silence for weakness. At the man who had left her in the rain believing she was the one being discarded. Then she gave him the only answer he had truly earned. The same answer she gave him on anniversary night. She smiled, quietly, coldly, finally. Then the window rose and she left him there. Under the rain, under the weight of his own ruin, under a sky that had waited 6 years to fall. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Quiet Knife for more dark betrayal stories, silent revenge, and cold endings. And tell me in the comments, was this justice or something colder?